When thinking of sequels, most people can think of their favorite right off the bat. Maybe it's Earthbound, Modern Warfare 2, Banjo-Tooie, or maybe Knack 2. But good sequels are few and far between, in such a serious sense that I truly believe them to be dying. The most recent example I can think of has to do with an indie game that recently came to fame. Unless you lived under a rock for the latter half of 2020, you've probably heard of this little game called Among Us. And while this video isn't about that game, its story is touching. It was a little tiny team of developers called Innersloth setting out to make a fun game. And they did. But while it's getting plenty of attention now, it wasn't always that way. The game actually released all the way back in 2018. You see, up until just recently, Among Us only saw moderate success, though the team was planning on making a sequel, but they never did. Once Among Us started getting popular, the team decided to continue updating their game to support the original release instead of making a second one, and that brings us to the point of this video. Where have all the sequels gone? Now, when I ask a question like, where have sequels gone? I can already understand why some people might be contrarian, because there are still sequels. In fact, there are lots of sequels. The problem is most sequels released today have a year in the title, or are the 8,000th release in a series. When discussing the fact that there are sometimes endless loops of mediocre sequels, a few big franchises come to mind. Games that launched around the mid-2000s are prime ground for sequel-hungry publishers. I think that everyone remembers the Assassin's Creed Unity launch fiasco, with its endless glitches and mediocre gameplay, all because Ubisoft had to have its precious yearly release. Every new Call of Duty is hit or miss, with some newer games leaving memorable campaigns completely in the dust, or having controversial multiplayer with absolutely nothing new going on, as the maps almost all have the 3-lane design that COD has been using since the 90s. Some of the COD games that do try to innovate often go too far off course of what makes the game fun, and it's a complete dumpster fire. I could probably rag a whole lot more on sports games here, but honestly, the rules of football have not changed much for the better part of 3 centuries, so the video game can only change so much. I think sports games maybe ought to move to one game only. Madden 2K could just be singular games that get updated every season, much like Fortnite or Destiny does, but for sports games. And if EA still wants its money, maybe it can make it a subscription service or something. A favorite of mine that has fallen into seemingly low-tier sequel purgatory is Halo. Since Bungie is no longer a Microsoft-owned studio, and it wanted to continue using its cash cow IP, Halo 4 and 5 were made by new developers, 343 Industries, and they've been polarizing from the start. They changed Halo too much. It feels like COD, the armor looks dumb. I think most people can agree that the campaigns for both of them definitely don't stack up to the Bungie Halos, which is sad because it's such a beloved franchise. We can always hope that Halo Infinite will be good. The Pokemon franchise has absolutely had some polarization within its fanbase because of its unwillingness to reinvent the wheel. Despite that, it still sells like hotcakes because of its broad appeal. Pokemon has changed very little about its formula. The biggest change since Gen 4 has been Mega Evolution, which many people did and still consider a bit gimmicky. Not nearly as gimmicky as Dynamaxing, though. It's pretty sad to see a once great game that was a hit for so many valid reasons turn into a shameless money grab. One thing that absolutely could have led to the descent in quality of this series is something I like to call the push for 3D.
Open your eyes and your mind to the realism of Nintendo 64 as you play Super Mario 64.
In the mid-90s, something crazy happened to the world of gaming. A third dimension was added to the realm of possibilities, with a gaming console capable of rendering polygons directly on your TV becoming a staple of every gamer's collection. This led to so many classic games, many of which are still treasured to this day. It also led to many series moving from their pixelated roots into a polygon-centered 3D world. In the early days, this was usually in the form of a spin-off, or sister series that wasn't completely related to the classic gameplay. But as time went on, it became apparent that large studios intended to spend more money to make all of their games 3D, even the ones that didn't need it. Pokemon was stripped of its gorgeous pixel art and stylized drawings in favor of new 3D models that could be more easily manipulated to move about with less effort, and much easier to reuse in newer games. Many people feel that it stripped a layer of character away. Amazing anime-inspired sprites became soulless, chibi character models. And this game series suffered further due to rushed development cycles, losing several directors due to them getting promoted to higher ranks among Nintendo, as they honestly deserved. Side-scrolling Mario games began to use 3D models on a 2D plane in order to facilitate animation of moving parts, and Harvest Moon became a top-down game with 3D characters instead of 2D sprites or character portraits, ruining the artsy charm for many people. Many Harvest Moon fans still prefer the SNES or N64 originals for their style, and many others have moved on to newer, similar games such as Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is much like Among Us in the fact that if you haven't played the masterpiece that is Stardew Valley, a game made completely from scratch by a single man, Eric Brony, also known as Concerned Ape, then you're doing yourself a disservice. It's easily one of the most addictive and relaxing games I've ever played in my life. I would consider it nearly perfect, as the few cons there are about the game are heavily overshadowed by the fact that you could probably go the entire game without even touching them. Around 100 hours into Stardew Valley, a game that, by the way, is only $15, I began to finish up the main goals I'd set for myself in the playthrough. I'd made friends with most of the characters that interested me, so I was having fun just doing the more obscure stuff, finishing up extra challenges and trying to maximize my profits, squeezing every last bit of fun I could get from the game that was so graciously pouring it out. I started to daydream as to what the sequel to this game could look like, so I did some research. Turns out Eric Brony is more focused on making his game as perfect as possible through updates, and after that he plans on working on other smaller projects, which is completely fine, far be it for me to tell another developer how to do their job. But it does mean that if we do get a Stardew Valley 2, it might not be for a while. The same way Among Us is focusing on adding things to their currently popular game instead of making a sequel that would probably sell very well. When it comes to sequels, some games feel like minor updates, and some games that get constant updates could probably make their games even better if they just made a sequel. One such game is Overwatch, which is getting a sequel, but not in the way we all expected. The way I imagine Overwatch 2 would look would be a completely new cast of characters with only maybe half a dozen of the original heroes being in the next game, completely renewing the game and creating a completely fresh experience, separate from the old game balance. Instead, Overwatch 2 seems like more of an expansion or large-scale update. The multiplayer is going to be more or less the same, seeing as how Overwatch players will be given access to the new heroes and maps, as well as the ability to play side-by-side with Overwatch 2 players in player versus player multiplayer. All in all, Overwatch 2 just sort of sounds like if Fortnite's Battle Royale mode got a paid mode, with co-op and single-player missions. Still, some games get awesome updates, and that's enough to keep many members of their communities happy. So I suppose that's mitigating the need for sequels to an extent. But what about games that don't get sequels? Some games don't have sequels at all, or an IP is just left in the dust to rot, much like the rare games that are owned by Microsoft. Sure would be nice to see a cool new Banjo-Kazooie game that wasn't a spin-off about cars, or a Perfect Dark game that upgraded the game design of the originals into the modern era, or even a Conker's Bad Fur Day 2. Loads of Nintendo IPs haven't seen games in decades, like the F-Zero series, Golden Sun series, Wario Land series, Advance Wars series, Punch-Out series, Star Fox series, Judy Robo series, Custom Robo series, and much, much more! You know, come to think of it, the only 3D Mario to ever get a direct sequel was Galaxy, and that's just because they didn't get to fit everything they wanted into Galaxy 1. We'll never get a Sunshine 2 or Odyssey 2. Not only that, but there are countless indie games that are not getting updates that might never get another installment. And don't even get me started on Valve games. They have... Oh, actually, you know what? It looks like those kind of are finally getting sequels.